Genesis chapter 41, 7 Year Prophecies. And as James went over last Sunday, over Genesis chapter 40, we saw two dreams. One from the chief butler and one from the chief baker. And remember, Joseph, as we keep seeing, kind of has that divine gift of interpretation. So he's able to rightly divide and illustrate dreams that are given by God. And also we see Joseph kind of gets impatient and shows us how he too is man. There was only one man in the flesh who was without sin, and that was Christ. And even though he did inherit the covenant from Abraham and God passed down, he does represent a godly man, but there was only one in the flesh that was without sin, like I said, and that was Christ. So we'll pick right back up at Genesis 41, chapter 1. And it came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh dreamed, and behold, he stood by the river. So, first thing I want to look at, James covered last Sunday, we see that phrase, came to pass at the end of 2 full years. And we can kind of connect the dots here and see how Joseph is around 38 years old when this is all taking place. And remember, Pharaoh, that Pharaoh is the title of the leader of Egypt at the time. It was just like a generic title. And remember, Joseph's gift that we keep seeing is his ability to interpret God's divine dreams and visions. Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, most likely was not a Christian man, has a divine dream, just like we've seen with the chief butler and baker. Verse 2. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 well-favored kine and fat-fleshed, and they fed in the meadows. So this is going to be the start of Pharaoh's dream. This is going to be what took place. And that word kine there, when it says 7 well-favored kine is just cows, female cattle. That's all it is. They were fat-fleshed, they were very healthy, and they fed in the meadows. And I want to pay attention there. It says 7 of them. And remember, 7 in biblical numerics is completeness or perfection. So there were 7 healthy, well-favored cows feeding in the meadows to start Pharaoh's dream. Verse 3. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them out of the river, ill-favored and lean-fleshed, and stood by the other kine upon the brink of the river. So 7 more of these female cattle came out, but they were sickly. They were real skinny. These two groups stood beside each other in the river. Verse 4. And the ill-favored and lean-fleshed kine did eat up the 7 well-favored and fat kine. So Pharaoh awoke. So these 7 sickly cattle ate up the well-favored cattle in this dream and woke them up. We're going to see how those metaphors take place here in a minute. And that word eat up, when you translate it, means to consume all. So that those 7 sick cattle overtook those well-favored cattle. So verse 5. And he slept and dreamed the second time. So now we're seeing the second dream that Pharaoh's having. And behold, 7 ears of corn came up upon one stalk, rank and good. So now, once again, the second dream, now there's 7, same spirit or same completeness or perfection. These 7 ears of corn came up, and they were healthy, very healthy corn stalks that come up. Verse 6. And behold, 7 thin ears, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. So kind of mimicking his first dream, we had the 7 good favored cattle, 7 ill favored. Now we're seeing the 7 well stalks of corn and the 7 sick stalks of corn, weak stalks of corn come up. So we're kind of going to see this is a repetition of the same dream, showing emphasis. So verse 7. And the 7 thin ears devoured the 7 rank and full ears, and Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So the 7 thin ears devoured or consumed the 7 healthy ears of the corn. It overthrew them. And once again, this dream's almost it's the same dream being told with different analogies. So showing emphasis that something's going to take place. Verse 8. And it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. So, first thing I want to look at here, magicians. That word is used and translated to chardim, meaning Hebrew word meaning horoscopus. So they were ones that were kind of could see beyond, so they believed. And he also called for all the wise men to come up, and wise men self-explanatory. They were all coming up to try to interpret the Pharaoh's dream, but they couldn't. They didn't understand this divine dream. They weren't men of God. They couldn't understand God's communication here. So verse 9. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. So, if we remember, Joseph spoke to the chief butler and asked him to remember him unto Pharaoh. That was when he was kind of showing him getting impatient with what was happening in his life, trying to take matters in his own hand. But now we see the chief butler is remembering Joseph. Now that they're needing Pharaoh's dream interpreted, he's like, wait a minute, I have a guy. I know who can interpret this divine dream. Verse 10. We're kind of seeing how God's plan's unfolding here on God's time, not Joseph's time. So verse 10. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. So he's, retelling what took place in chapter 40. Verse 11. And we dreamed a dream in one night, and I and he, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. So once again, reiterating what happened last chapter. Verse 12. And there was there with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant to the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dream he did interpret. And remember, it said that Pharaoh was getting wroth because no one could, or he woke up and was kind of worried about this dream. Last chapter we saw the baker and the butler were sort of worried too because they didn't understand what it meant. And it was, anytime we have a divine communication, a divine dream in our lives and we don't understand it, it can kind of overwhelm you, be worrisome, right? These weren't men of God, they couldn't understand it. So verse 13. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was, me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. So he's filling the Pharaoh in on what all took place last chapter, and they were both in prison, but like James went over, one was innocent and one was guilty, but they couldn't really prove which one. So through these divine dreams, Joseph was able to interpret and give him his place in office back. He was an innocent man thrown in prison for something he didn't do. So verse 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. So they called for Joseph after he told Pharaoh what all took place and how Joseph can interpret these dreams. Took Joseph out of prison, got him all cleaned up so he can be presented unto the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh was royalty; he was the king, so they wouldn't allow him to be all scraggly coming into contact with him. So verse 15. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer unto peace. So pay attention here. Pharaoh, he's acknowledging Joseph for his gift of interpretation. And immediately Joseph gives all the glory to God. Said, this isn't me giving you peace unto this. I'm just a vessel. God is the one that can give you peace and help you understand this divine dream. And this really shows Joseph's relationship with God. He's locked in prison. He finally gets to be face to face with the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt at the time. And even though we saw in last chapter how, yes, he's a man of the flesh, he had his shortcomings, he's getting impatient with what's happening in his life, he could have easily agreed with the Pharaoh and used it as a way to gain his freedom and gain the Pharaoh's trust. But instead, he keeps God firsthand, gives all the glory to him, lets Pharaoh know, a man who is not a man of God, that, look, God is the one that can give you peace, not me. So verse 17. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. So we're going to see here Pharaoh re-illustrating the dreams we just read back unto Joseph. Verse 18. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 kine, fat-fleshed, and well-favored, and they fed in the meadows. Remember, kine being those female cattle. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor, and very ill-favored, and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. And the lean and the ill-favored kine did eat up the first 7 fat kine. Verse 21. And when they had eaten them up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning. So I awoke. And I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind sprung up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. So he even further explains to Joseph that all the wise and magicians and higher-ups, the wise men of Egypt, couldn't interpret this dream, somewhat giving an opinion or his opinion and doubt unto Joseph, but not unto Joseph specifically, but almost unto God's ability to bring peace. Pharaoh kind of shows here in this last statement that he's given more of his faith unto the wise men and not of God's ability to bring him peace. Kind of showing where his relationship with God is, whether there is one or not. So verse 25. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. God has shewed Pharaoh that he is about to do what he is about to do. So Joseph explaining that this is a divine communication from God. Like James preached on before, God can speak and use anyone he wants to. Just because you may have an atheist surgeon doesn't mean you shouldn't pray and God can't lead them to a successful surgery, right? Just because someone's not a man of God doesn't mean God can't use them and work in their lives. And that's what we're seeing here with the Pharaoh. Verse 26. The 7 good kine are 7 years. So now we're seeing Joseph fully reiterate and explain the Pharaoh's dream. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. So the good cattle and the good ears represent 7 years. Verse 27. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. So his dreams are representing 7 good years, 7 healthy years, 7 years of famine. Okay? That's what his dreams, what God is telling him in his dreams, and Joseph's interpreted it. Verse 28. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh, what God is about to do, he sheweth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. So once again, the next 7 years, plenty of food, plenty of needs. The land will be bountiful. That's what those 7 good kine and 7 good corns are representing. Verse 30. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. So, once again, the following 7 years will have such a great famine, starvation, that the past 7 years will be forgotten. Pay attention to what's going to take place here. Verse 31. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. So emphasizing how terrible this 7-year famine is going to be. It's going to be so bad that 7 years of plentiful, bountiful land of needs and food, you're going to completely forget it. It's going to be rough. So verse 32. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. So the reason this dream was reiterated twice with 2 different examples Joseph's explaining the emphasis on the matter of what God's given him. Pay attention because this is coming to pass. Verse 33. Now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. So Pharaoh is to look unto a wise man to be over the land of Egypt for preparation, not only for the bountiful 7 years, but also the grievous and starvation of the 7 years coming after. Verse 34. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. So during the 7 plentiful years, the Pharaoh should save up a 5th of all the rations of the land of Egypt. That's what he's telling him. And he is to appoint specific officers to make this happen, or to sort of overwatch this. Verse 35. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn unto the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. So again, save, store the food. Those 7 bountiful years, don't take them for granted. Start preparing now, Start preparing now, because there is 7 years of famine coming. Verse 36. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Follow these instructions, so that Egypt will be prepared and not have to be worrisome in this famine that is to come. This is a divine instruction from God. God's preparing them. Verse 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, Can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? So the Pharaoh is asking this statement kind of like a rhetorical statement here. He's asking all of his servants, is there a man so strong in the Spirit of God that can lead us through this? Knowing what just took place, he knows Joseph has the perfect qualification for this. So verse 39. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, Forasmuch as God hath shewed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. So Pharaoh is presenting this unto Joseph after he said that rhetorical statement. Verse 40. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. So the Pharaoh is setting Joseph over the land of Egypt for this next 14-year period. So I want to kind of take a step back and let's just pay attention to how God works here. Joseph originally was sold by his own brothers unto slavery. God led him to be the head keeper of his master's house. Joseph was sent unto prison through his master's wife, through her lies and deception, right? God led him to be the head prisoner, the head of over the prison inside. To now being head over Egypt. And like James went over last chapter, we see, again, Joseph getting impatient, trying to take matters in his own hand, but Joseph keeps his relationship with God. Yes, he falls short, but how many times do we fall short? And we have to remember, it's not our timing, it's God's timing. God took Joseph from originally being a slave that was sold by his own brothers all the way to now he's head over Egypt for the next 14 years. He was getting impatient. We all get impatient. And if we take a look here, we got to remember Joseph is going to be passed down, or is being passed down, that same covenant we saw between God and Abraham. And you don't have to flip here if you don't want to. I've got some slides, but that covenant, going back to Genesis chapter 12, we're going to be looking at verses 1, 2, and 3. So verse 1, Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, and unto the land that I will shew thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So this is that same covenant that we seen that's to be passed down from generation to generation. And as we see, yes, he's getting impatient, but God's holding up his end of the covenant. Joseph, yes, he's getting impatient, but he's also living by God's guidance and keeping that covenant as promised, so it's still being in effect. God is blessing Joseph on God's time, not Joseph's time. So we'll get back to Genesis chapter 41, and I just want to pay attention here that the day we live in now, where mankind is very impatient. We want it now. We want it now. We always have to remember it's God's time, not our time. So back to Genesis chapter 41, verse 42. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. So we're seeing that exchange in leadership here. Pharaoh's removing his ring, that signet, putting that signet that signifies head over Egypt, dressing Joseph in fine linens because he is to lead Egypt through God's guidance over the next 14 years. 7 years of preparation, 7 years of famine. So verse 43. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bow the knee, and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Verse 45. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zapnath-Paneah, bear with me, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. So Joseph's now given an Egyptian name, and I went down a loop here studying, trying to figure out the meaning of this Egyptian name, and there's a lot of debate over what his name actually meant. After looking, I realized throughout the rest of Joseph's story, he is still referred to as Joseph. So ignore his Egyptian name. Yes, it's important. That's how the Egyptians referred to him, but the Bible still refers to him as Joseph. There's no underlying meaning there. So, anyway, verse 46. Oh, I do want to make this one note. One of the main meanings that a lot of scholars interpret his name to is interpreter to divine messages. That's what they believed his Egyptian name meant, but there's still not like set in stone proof over that. But anyway, rest of Genesis still going to refer to him as Joseph. So verse 46. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. So Joseph's going out onto this journey, this 14-year journey. And in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. So exactly what God told Pharaoh in his dreams, Joseph was able to interpret, is happening. It's starting now. It's taking place. So verse 48. And he gathered up all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, the food of the field, which was round about every city, laid he up in the same. So he is following God's guidance here. The land brought forth plentiful. He's stockpiling and preparing, doing exactly what God was getting him prepared to do. Verse 49. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. Go count the sand of the sea. You can't count it. It's plentiful, bountiful. Same thing with their corn. They had so much corn, couldn't even count it. They lost count. So Joseph is following God's guidance here. Verse 50. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, bare unto him. So just like we see the 7 years of plenty, God is blessing Joseph, bringing forth 2 sons, carrying on his lineage, his seed. So even in Joseph's life, not just Egypt's lifespan here, 7 years of plenty, bringing forth food and more lineage to Joseph. Verse 51. And Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh, for God, said he, hath made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. Manasseh literally meaning forgetting. Okay? Verse 52. And the name of the second called Ephraim, for God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Ephraim literally meaning doubled or fruitfulness. So even throughout the naming of his children, which were a blessing from God, Joseph is remembering God and God's blessings firsthand. He's naming his children after what has taken place and how God has blessed him. Joseph is a great example on always giving God that firsthand remembrance. Verse 53. And in the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended. So now that first 7 years coming to an end. Verse 54. And the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said, and the dearth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. Dearth meaning hunger. There was that 7-year famine coming. What do you know? Joseph followed God's guidance. Egypt's got bread. They've got plenty of food. They're bountiful. They prepared for what was to come. Verse 55. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go unto Joseph, what he saith to you, do. So these people, they're starting to notice a famine coming, a shortage. They're going to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's holding up his end of the deal. He promised Joseph leadership over the next 14 years. He said, no, don't come to me. I'm not your leader right now. Joseph's your leader. He has that divine gift. I gave him that signet. He is over Egypt. Verse 56. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. That term wax sore, think of someone who gets their hair waxed. That famine is removed in Egypt. Why? Because they followed God's commandment. There is bountiful food in Egypt. They can eat. And this famine was over the whole world. And that famine was removed from Egypt. Why? Because they followed God's lead. They followed his preparation. So verse 57. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. So through following God's guidance through the dreams of the Pharaoh, Joseph, being able to interpret those divine visions, led Egypt and were able to use God's warning and preparation for this famine that was so great to overcome that for most of the world, all the world. They were able to come into Egypt and eat and live during this famine. Why? All because God gave them that guidance. So there's three things I want to look at from this chapter. So I know James spoke on it before. We've went over it a couple times this chapter, but we see a great example here on how God can also use people who are not necessarily followers of him in order for his will to be done. And like I said, James used the reference for an atheist surgeon is going to perform surgery on you. Don't let your belief in God fall short and think that he can't work through their lives and guide them to perform a successful and safe surgery. The same thing we're seeing here. The Pharaoh wasn't a follower of God. God gave him divine dreams, and Joseph was able to use God's divine gift to interpret them, well prepare them for the land of famine. God used Pharaoh for his guidance. Also, I want to take a look at it from Joseph's standpoint. Us as Christians, we're followers of God. It's important for us to use our spiritual knowledge, our discernment that we gain from God, to help others who may not be believers in order to bring them to Christ's light. We say it all the time. Remember, we're mirrors. We're reflecting God's light. Same thing Joseph's doing to the baker, the butler, Pharaoh. He's bringing them to the light of God. But anyway, that's all I have for this chapter. But I just want to use Joseph as a great example here to always give remembrance to God first. Always let His blessings portray.